Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle, and today we have a very, very special episode because we don't only have one guest, but we have two. But our guest of honor tonight is Ingrid Kincaid, the Rune woman herself. And I am so excited and honored to have her as a guest because I've gotten to know Ingrid over the last handful of years. I've taken a class with Ingrid. I've read both of her books. Mario and I have both had the pleasure of speaking to her in person and have conversations. So we have a really good feel of Ingrid's energy. We just really appreciate her, all the wisdom she has to share, and specifically about the runes and the Northern mysteries. And so tonight we're going to get into all of those things and learn more about Ingrid and her story and how she came to work with the runes, how the runes initially actually just found her. And then also we'll be joined by my man Mario of Symbolic Studies. So for anyone who's watching and isn't familiar with Mario, he is a student of all things symbolic. Northern symbolism has been one of his deepest rabbit holes lately. So I figured we'd bring him into the mix because him and Ingrid also have had some really great conversations together. And the three of us, I think, are going to hit it off and have a really good time. So Ingrid's knowledge and personal experience with the runes and Northern mysteries is vast and deeply rooted in the understanding of ancestral traditions. She is a, quote, internationally known author, educator, elder, and spiritual guide, an irreverent, wise woman whose journeys are both imaginary and real. And before we get going and bring everybody in, I just want to give a shout out to all my patrons as well. Thank you for all your support. All you guys rolling in lately is very much greatly appreciated. And you're allowing me to continue this journey with the Healing Home, continue to make medicine for all the people and share it with the world. So without further ado, please help me when welcoming Ingrid and Mario to the stream. Hello, Ingrid.
Hi. I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And Mario looks like he's buffering.
right. Mario looks like a white circle on a black background. That's the symbolism of Mario, right?
It really is actually. And a lot of the symbolism we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah.
And our internet's really slow. And so he's on a hotspot. That might be why he's coming out.
Okay.
But while we wait for him, I'd like you to introduce yourself a little bit. Who don't know who you are. And then also, if you could just kind of tell us a little bit of how you came to work with the runes. I know your story is long and wonderful with all this. So whatever you feel like sharing in that respect would be great.
I'm happy to do that. So I would first of all restate that I consider myself the irreverent and irreverent wise woman, and the wisdom that I tap into is ancestral wisdom and the symbolic wisdom of the runes, but runes not that are so popularized today with cartoons and Hollywood and chest thumping Viking puffery, because that's what most people think of. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I work with something that I believe is much older than that and much a deeper resonance that has nothing really to do with the Vikings as such, even though they play a big part in our recognition of rune wisdom. I wasn't looking for this work. So I would just say that flat out as, I've always been teaching. I always love speaking and lecturing, and the big part of my life up until the runes began to give me no other option, a big part of my life was that I spent 30 years as a residential real estate broker, mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area. That was a career that I had, and that started back in the 80s and early 1980s. And so, like I said, I didn't have any background. In fact, I had been raised in a very conventional kind of Christian Bible, well, I'd say Bible thumping background. And I was at a house that I was house sitting or holding open, holding open for sale. And there was a pouch on the coffee table. And as part of my nature, which is incredibly curious, and I'm always full of mischief, I just thought, well, that's interesting. I'm going to dump this out. Whatever's in here feels like rocks or stones or something. And I just dumped this bag of things out onto the coffee table. And when I did, what was there were these oval, looking back, it was probably a set that had been purchased through together with the book that Ralph Blum had published in the 80s, which was called the Rune book. And these symbols on these white clay tiles were there on the coffee table in front of me. And there was this really strange, like, shifting of the realities. And in that moment, there was a part of me that said, oh, I know what this is. And then not only did I know what it was, but I also knew what they meant. And it was a very strange, disruptive thinning of the veil. As the, there was something happened there that was not in the practical selling real estate, writing mortgages and contracts and all of that. It was like, no, this is something really weird. And so my Ingrid self said, no, you don't know what it is. And then this other thing said, yes, you do. And I had an argument of, no, I don't. And yes, you do. And in that moment, I said, okay, I'm just going to put this back in the pouch. It's a practical thing. It's like, I'm just going to shove all these things back in the pouch because I have a sense that this could really mess up my life. So that's what I did, is I just stuck them back in the pouch and set them back up like I had never touched the thing. But that wasn't what happened, because what I have come to
You still there?
You still there?
I'm still here. I just keep, it said that Mario's thing had cut out. So I just stopped talking. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The private chat. Yes.
Okay. All right. So what I have come to understand, and really not just believe, but just know intuitively, is that in that moment, what I experienced was an ancestral memory of something that was part of my ancestral heritage, and that I had been visited by not only my ancestors, I had also been visited by the rune beings themselves. And I say that, I will clarify that, because most often I find people who work with runes or write about runes or speak about runes work with them as a symbol system, or even less than that. They think of them as letters, merely as letters of an alphabet. And they play games with, I can write my name with rune letters. And what has happened for me is that I have begun to understand that the symbols that these markings that are called runes are like signatures, that as if they're a signature of an actual sentient ancient being. And that when you look at that symbol, it's as if you were looking at someone's name that they had signed. And similar to, you could see my name signed someplace and you could say, oh, that's Ingrid's signature. I know Ingrid, but you don't know all about me. And somebody else might say, I also know Ingrid, and they know a little bit about me. But the essence of that signature holds the wholeness of all that I am, whether people know bits and pieces or some more or some less. Just that's the signature. And that's what have, as I've worked all of these, many years with the runes, and I am very old. That's why I call myself an elder. that I've come to understand that what happened for me was a remembering of something that's part of my background, my DNA, my ancestral line. It's in my blood, it's in my bones, and I was I was called. I actually feel like the ancestors and the runes called me and gave me an assignment to do this work. And it wasn't optional, because no matter what I did after that, I could pretend. The runes started showing up. I started having information coming to me every place I looked. Sometimes I would say something to someone and I'd say, well, there's a rune about that. It's like, where did that come from? So I fought with it for a very long time. That also goes back to the stubborn irreverence and the mischief part of who I am. But they wouldn't let me go. And I also can say, really, with all honesty, that I believe that there's so many individuals now that are being contacted or reconnected with this ancestral wisdom, and that each of us holds a piece, and that the gift I bring is not only the gift of teaching, the gift of age, the gift of my own genetic ancestry, but also the gift of my personality, in that place that I am irreverent. And, I drink whiskey and I swear and ride a motorcycle, and I don't, my daughter even said to me just today, we were talking and she was teasing. She said, Mom, you're not really spiritual. I would never put that onto you. And that's true, because most people think spiritual is this high vibration, white light, connected with the ethers. And the runes work with me on this down to earth, pragmatic, like, no nonsense. This is the truth of life. It's, if you plant tomatoes in your garden, tomatoes are going to grow, and don't try and make that something other than just, this is the reality. An acorn falls off the tree and it grows into an oak tree. It can't grow into anything except an oak tree, because it's an acorn. And that's how for me, and that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just, for me, this is how the runes speak to me, and the wisdom that they have is really about how can we reconnect with the earth? How can we live in relationship and in harmony with the earth, and stop trying to vibrate ourselves away from it? So this is a earth-based form of spirituality that's connected to an ancestry of people in the north, people of the dark, people of cold, people of very difficult living conditions. And we need that wisdom. I really believe we do. So there, like I said, I could talk, just shut me up. Have to warm up a little bit.
No, it's perfect. And sorry if there's any echo for people. I'm going to mute you for a second. But all the things that you said, and that's why I wanted to allow you to introduce yourself and put yourself out there as to your standpoint and where you come from with the runes. Because from the first day I met you, which was years ago at Invoke, and I wouldn't even expect you to remember this, because you just read my runes. And I went to your table and you had your book, and I got a rune reading from you. And I remember walking away from the table, and I had great feelings about everything. And I said to Mario, I said, I felt like I was sitting across from myself like 50 years from now. Like, there was something so deep, and I don't know if I've ever even said that to you, but there was something so deeply resonant that I felt just with you. And then not only with the runes, but the way that you do present them and the questions you ask. And you're not afraid to question where these came from, the mainstream story, why we're given the 24 runes or what have you. Why are these systems the way that they are? You are open to all these possibilities. And I just always appreciate the groundedness, the earthiness that you're coming from with these places, or where you're going to from these places that you're exploring, basically. And so that's one of the things I really wanted to get into, is the Northumbrian runes. And how you work with them, because you were my introduction to them. And not a lot of people talk about them. And when I've brought up in passing with other people that I talk to about runes and say, have you ever heard of the 33 runes? And most people don't. Most people have never heard of that. They don't understand that there's multiple systems. And so if you could talk a little bit about when you first, that first pouch, were they the Northumbrian runes? Or did you come later to discover them? And then how did you see your practice change and your relationship change once you included all 33?
Is that one question?
That's multiple. You can pick whatever one you want.
Yes. Okay. The runes that were in the pouch that I dumped out on the coffee table, it was a set of 24 rune symbols, and there was also this rune, this piece of clay that had nothing on it, and everybody calls that the blank rune, and to which I say, it's like, well, that's like saying this is a non-letter of the alphabet. I don't know what that, just save it in case you lose the rune. So it wasn't, and so what's called the Northumbrian runes, I experience working with 33 runes, and I speak of those additional 9 runes as the runes of the giants, or the Jotnir, the giants. And again, what I say, you can agree with or disagree. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm ambivalent about it. I just speak from my experience and how the rune beings and the ancestors, my ancestors, connect with me and what they show me. So the first, and I speak about this, I do have 2 books that I've written on the runes. One is The Real and the other is The Lost Teachings of the Runes. And I speak about this, that if we see thank you. Yes. Lovely books. I really I use them for reference. Sometimes I can't even remember what I wrote in there. It's like, did I really write that?
Oh, highly recommend them. Both of them.
So I began to see that the cosmos, let's say the void, the gap, is made up of this beautiful multidimensional weaving of lines that go together, that form grids. And part of the magic of the rune symbols are that if you draw even the simple grid of 9 lines, it's referred to as the grid of 9, you can actually place all the rune symbols on these 9 intersecting lines. It's 3 parallel vertical, and then there's the X's on it, and then they continue. It's not like it's static. It continues out into the void, so that there's a never-ending pattern of intersecting lines, and that the runes as shapes actually all fit as part, like a digital clock almost, that they fit on the grid. And that once I began to see that and actually connect, I began to be shown that there's not a numbered amount of runes. That is, to limit them, there's 24 or there's 33 or there's 199 is actually really very human and limiting. And that when we begin to look at these patterns of the grid in the void, is that there are countless rune shapes which would actually be in harmony with the knowing that there's an unlimited number of these beings that are holding ancient wisdom, and that let me back up. So they intersect each other, and so they form each other. And I always encourage students in my rune classes to work with graph paper to get an understanding of how runes make up each other. And when you have one rune and another rune intersects it, and then it forms a rune, that this is ongoing. This isn't a dynamic, alive experience that's ever happening in this web of intersecting lines. So that would be like looking up into the heavens at night and saying there's a limited number of stars, and maybe there's a limited number that we can see, but for us to think that there's a limitation means that there's an end to something. And I don't believe that that's true with regard to the runes or to the stars. That it was a very powerful, potent system of connecting with the unseen ones, with the forces of life and nature and the wisdom of the cosmos. And that when this connection with these ancient ways of knowing began to be forbidden, and you could lose your life, for instance, for practicing with them or working with them. The part of the wisdom in reducing them to a limited number and to convert them into an alphabetic symbol allowed the essence of what the runes are to be preserved in a non-dangerous way. And it had to be limited, because it couldn't be this endless, it's like the limitations of the sounds of our alphabet. And we know that the human is capable of making many more sounds that are represented in the 26 letters of our particular alphabet. So it's the same with the runes. But what happened is the thing that preserved them, kept them safe, actually has imprisoned them now. Because now people can't look beyond that. It's like there's a militancy even in the runic communities. It's kind of like people saying, I only read the King James Bible, and this is the Bible that's approved by God, and this is the Bible Jesus read, or all that kind of stuff. And you find that militancy in the runic communities. It's like, I only work with the 24 runes, and these were the runes that were given to Odin, and this is the gospel, this is the runic gospel. And when we do that, then we have disconnected ourselves from the actual relationship that we can have with these symbols that connect to actual beings. And that the more that I began to be with, the more that when I stopped resisting and started allowing, then I began to see that there were many, many more rune shapes, even shapes that aren't included in the 33, that because you begin to, it's like you intuit them, you begin to feel them. And for instance, am I talking too much?
No, you're good.
Okay, so let's take a rune that's called Lagus. It's a straight vertical line. It has a little short diagonal line that goes off to the right at the top. And people refer to that as Lagus, the rune of water, which holds a lot. I mean, water, but water, thank you. I can't talk and find things in the book, but that's Lagus. But if you kind of go a little more with this and you start thinking, well, is there a rune being that is connected to rainwater? Is there a rune being that's ocean water? Is there a rune being that's water that's held in a well, or water that's held in a lake, or the stream that moves to the ocean? Because we do have a rune that represents frozen water, Isa. We have a rune that represents hail, which is also frozen water, but it has its own energy and story about it. So why couldn't there be? And my answer to that is that there are so many other shapes and symbols that are the representations of all these other beings that hold the teaching of that particular aspect of life wisdom. And so in writing a book, for instance, and listing 33 runes, I had to have a limitation. Like I could write a book about 24, I could write about 33, I could write about 66. There has to be a limitation in that. But I speak about the fact that that if you are working with runes, if you are listening to them, if you're connecting with them, don't discount yourself if you begin to see other shapes. And when they show up, very often it's like, oh, that's a rune. And even if you don't know what it is, write the shape down, make a note of that particular shape, and then ask yourself the questions such as, well, what was I thinking about when I saw that? Or what was I doing? Or where did it appear for me? Because collectively, as more and more of us, even globally, are beginning to be contacted by the ancestors and given bits and pieces of this ancient wisdom to reuse, to be reactivated, that each of us are going to be collecting different parts of it. And when we come together and I draw a shape and say, well, I saw this shape and it was in reference to that, and someone else says, well, the same thing happened for me, and another person says, yes, I had the same experience, then we are collectively we're gathering in that which has been dispersed or went off away because it was too dangerous, such a period of time when it was just too dangerous for us to have association with this or to actually speak about it. And that we're also looking at a culture that was oral, where these, perhaps the runes were, because they're sounds, you can hum them, you can vibrate them, you can feel them in your body. It's like our body can become an instrument to this sound, that maybe we were transmitting them to each other through vibration. And then the shape was written when we hummed a certain way. Then there was a shape that represented that, much like notes on a musical staff. And then going even further, because I talk about that in both of my books, I believe that some of these rune vibrations, which were the essence of creation, this coming of the sound, have been frozen in the ice. That sound, you can see sound as it affects water, and that spirit or that essence of the vibration of sound became frozen in the waters that are held in the, let's say, in the ice caps in the great glaciers. And that just like a crystal stone holds information, water crystals also hold information. And I ask that, is it possible that the sound of some of these runes are actually held in the crystal of the ice? And that, yes, we're having catastrophic global change. However, instead of always looking at the negative, why not include in there and say, yes, there's catastrophe and there's melting of the ice, but when the ice melts, what's being released is the sound of a rune. Is there rune wisdom that was preserved at the time of the, and I don't like creation meaning like God in the start, but the coming into form of matter? Was there wisdom locked in the ice crystals? And is this releasing of the melting of the ice, releasing this information, giving more and more of us connectedness and access? And it's wisdom that we need now, because we are facing another, this is not the first time, folks, that this has happened. Are we facing another dramatic change globally, earthwise, climate, creatures, food, everything? And we need the wisdom that was wisely held in the ice. So, I mean, those are the kinds of questions I present, because I don't pretend to have an answer or to think that one way is right or another way is better. It's just, we need to ask different questions when we work with the runes.
Yes, and I would 100% agree about the questions. And I love the imagery even of thinking of these glaciers melting and things being released and the sounds of the runes being held there. And to me, it makes so much sense. And the infinity of this universe, Mother Nature. It is a continuous cycle. So it always does make me think about how couldn't there be a rune for, like you said, ocean water or salt water or what have you. It seems that it would be impossible that there wouldn't be. So you've just always been that spark for me to question more about this practice in general and what it means and how deep it really goes. And I kind of tend to think that it might be one of the points of origin for everything. And because the runes are so deep and rooted in tradition and ancestry, they have such a way of teaching us that it's up to us. It is all about us. And if not in a selfish way, but if you're not taking care of you, how can you take care of someone else, sort of thing. And I always remember one of the things that you'd said in your class when I took it with you, the Wheel of Life, was, when you pull your rune, don't just go right to a book or a pamphlet or the internet to find out what that rune means. Check in with yourself and ask, what does that rune mean to me? And that kind of goes along with when you were talking about if you maybe see a different shape, write it down and see what that means. But before you go to someone else's explanation, see what it means for you before anything else. And I think that that is such a very important lesson and tradition that I see in the Northern traditions throughout other things than just the runes, just the philosophies, the way they lived their life. It was there's a strong independence there. And it always comes back to self. And I see Mario has joined us. So speaking of the self, let's see if he's here and if he can hear us.
I am here.
All right.
Hear you guys.
Great.
So, yeah, no, the connection is, it's going in and out over here, but I'm appreciating the conversation. And just to, I guess, continue to pull at this thread regarding the self, people refer to themselves, right? I, the letter I, right? That's me. That's who I am. And then it's also interesting, the letter I, phonetically, right, there's a relationship with actual eyes, right, your visual eyes, and then you can get into the third eye and things like that. And in the Bach saga, I thought it was really interesting that they mentioned that the lowercase I is actually the world axis in the middle of this place, and the dot on top is actually the pole star. It's Polaris. So the shape of the letter I has this really interesting connection with the center of the Earth, and the world axis is this understanding that there is a bridge, if you will. It's the trunk of the world tree from the North Pole to the northern sky. And when I see Isa, right, I think of this same world axis, and I see a lot of polar wisdom, right, in that rune specifically. And my understanding, Michelle and I were talking about it, but Isa being as simple as it is, right, being kind of like the foundation or the unit that all of the other runes are kind of made out of. So it's a very basic shape, that one vertical line, but there is immense wisdom to be pulled at just from that rune and its basic shape. So I would love to hear Ingrid talk about Isa a little bit, and maybe kind of what I just mentioned regarding it being this basic sort of thing that the created out of, and maybe how polar wisdom or the northern mysteries are connected to that rune.
I will do that. First, yes, what page number is that so I can find it in about Isa? I wanted to read that.
255.
255. I want to read the poem as a start. In my in my first, well, both of my books, I have included a series of poems. I went through a 6-year period of writing a poem for each of the 33 runes, and each poem is only 33 words. Some people don't get that or see that right away, but so it's really like, what could I say about a rune? How much can I say in 33 words? And to me, that's what a poem actually is every word counts. So in reading this poem, when I say Isa, realm of ice, home to all the runes, the crushing weight of ages, you float. Hissing, groaning, there is movement in your stillness, preservation in destruction. Enthralled or released, I serve you. And all the poems are rather cryptic in the way that I wrote them, but if you take them apart, you begin to really understand something in a completely different way. When we think of the rune shapes, they, at least the way that we work with them, they are all straight lines. We can theorize as to why they're not spirals or circles, but they're preserved for us as straight lines. And I do believe that that's part of this grid, this rune shape being part of the lines that cross each other. So Isa is the realm of ice, and ice is a very interesting being in the fact that as it becomes solid, it doesn't become heavy, it becomes light. So when I say the crushing weight of ages, you float. So this is a really interesting concept of ice, is that, and it's the wisdom, it's the brilliance of nature, because if as water froze and ice became heavy, it would sink to the bottom and it could never melt, right? It just would build up and build up. So the fact that this being, this ice being, becomes light enough that it stays on the surface of the water, life is allowed to continue, the turtles and the fish and all the creatures, because it doesn't freeze all the way to the bottom. It's this heavy, heavy weight of ages, which is what the glaciers are. This heavy, crushing weight of ages floats. Should I keep talking?
Yes. If you have more
Okay,
to say.
I don't know, when it goes like that, should
Yes.
I be quiet?
If you have more to say.
Yes. Okay. So in that, if we thought of Isa as a glacier, and we just laid it over on its side, so it becomes a horizontal line instead of a vertical line, and we think of it as, just as we do the layers of ice, we read the history of the earth in the geologic sediment of mountains that have been pushed up, or riverbeds that are eroded away. The geologists can read in there. It's like, well, this happened, and there was a fire and a volcanic eruption, and I mean, that's all in there. It's also the same information that's held in a glacier. We know the story of things that happened on the earth because it's preserved in each season of layering of ice. I see, when I lay Isa down on its side and look at it like in those layers, that you could actually communicate to me some message by handing me an Isa rune. If you had taken each rune and dismantled it and made it into a series of single straight lines and laid them on top of each other on the glacier, just like the seasons are laid in the glacier, and I had the ability to know that, not that I studied it, but I had the ability to know how to take those layers apart and reassemble them into the story or the message that you'd given me. That's what the geologists do, archaeologists, whatever. They look at the layers and they give you a story, right? Because they know how to read it. And that to me is the brilliance of this singular line that's the rune called Isa, and that it really is the primary, because it's the shape from which everything else is made, and that it's a way that you could actually communicate information in code. Because how you what runes you took apart and what order you layered them in, and then you give me this singular line, and I look at it sideways, on its side, and I say, oh, she did this and she did this and she did that, and then I dismantle it and can have a story, can have the information. And so what Mario was speaking about is like, yes, I really believe that that's part of the magic, because I there's no accident with these shapes, and that if we set aside how well, culturally and spiritually, and we've been so manipulated for so many centuries. We've been taught that everything originated in Africa, or life started from a single point in the desert, and we have the three major religions of the world that are desert religions. We have everything coming from the south, and what's beginning to happen now is there's this opening of awareness that there were ancient cultures and life that existed in the north, that whether you want to say it, I wouldn't say, oh, that was the beginning, because that's going back to the same single source thing that we're being told, that simultaneously on the earth, in all different kinds of climates and all different kinds of conditions, there was wisdom and life emerging, and that we've completely wipe that off the map. Nobody talks, well, some people do. There's a great book called Beyond the North Wind that came out, was published about the same time as the Lost Teachings, and it looks at some of these ancient stories about the originations of life and wisdom and building and amazing things that were happening in the north, and that instead of us always moving origin stories from south to north, we need to look at the possibility that there was also things that were happening older in the north that moved south. It's travesty to me when somebody says, oh, Newgrange, Bruneboyne, this amazing burial mound or mysterious thing in Ireland, and they say, well, it's like the pyramids. They call it the pyramids of the north, yet it's older than the pyramids. So why wouldn't we reference this Newgrange or Bruneboyne and say the pyramids are the Newgrange of the south? Nobody ever talks like that, right? And yet the northern thing is older than the southern thing. I mean, this is a simplification, of course, of history and all of that, but just to look at how we've been so manipulated to think of everything always coming from a place other than the north. Even, the stories that the runes were taken up there from the Etruscans, or, I mean, it's just, it's a very limited way of looking at things. It's very myopic. It's the single origin creation story, just told with put a different dress on it and tell it, in a different way. I think that the runes are giving us an invitation to see that there was something amazing and ancient and powerful and wise that was happening in the north, just like there was that was happening in the south and happening around the equator. And stuff is being revealed as the ice is melting. More and more information is coming out about, that changes all that we've been taught for, in school and in the books and in the British Museum. And, I mean, it just goes on. And to me, it's so exciting to start asking the questions. It's like, wait a minute, why are we, particularly this whole group of peoples that come from the north, why are we so fixated on and fascinated by religions that come to us from the desert? That doesn't make any sense. And when you start working with the runes, it's like they have the language of the ancestors from this part of the world. People in the desert, maybe they do, but it's not as common to have them really understand what ice is. Right? I mean, you read about date palm trees and camels, and my family, my mother's people live up by the Arctic Circle. It's like dark for half of the year. The sun doesn't come up. and it's cold, and there's ice there. So when I have this way of knowing that speaks about an experience of people who live in a part of the world where it stays dark for half the year, that's a very different experience. And how is it that we're still so focused on all of these other teachings, and that yes, there's wisdom in that, but not at the expense of a body of ancient knowing that speaks about a different way of life in a different setting, in a different climate, and that the way we live, the way we dress, the way we ate, how we experienced spirituality had to be different. And homogenize it all, and there we can look for the beautiful similarities. Like I would say, well, if ice is a preserver, it's also a destroyer. If you don't have ice, how do you preserve something in the desert? What do? They dry it, don't they?
They dry it
They
and
dry it and
salt
salt it.
Yes. So it's kind of exciting to think of, like, well, the concept is there, but we have different ways that we speak about it because we're experiencing life differently. And this piece of ancient wisdom has been pushed aside or demonized or neglected for a long period of time. And I think today it's even, there's a hesitancy on the part of individuals to claim it. You know, it's like, oh, you're not allowed to do that. It's well, I'm doing it because look at me. You know, this is just look at me, where I come from. And I don't mean that in a good or bad way. It's like there can't be a denial of an existence of ancient peoples that lived in this kind of environment on the earth and experienced life, you know, same thing, birth and death and eating and pooping, you know, whatever you want. But it was done in a different way. And there had to be a different way of knowing how to live that allowed for survival in that particular climate. And let's bring this back and then sit together at the sacred fires with other people and come with our own spiritual knowing and begin to weave the stories, not to make it all one story, but to weave the stories together and to celebrate the diversity that the earth is. That, you know, we can't, I get off on a tangent. It's like people, oh, we're all one and we're all going to be the same. It's like, that's not going to work.
No.
Just ask me. It's like, what language are we going to speak? Hindi? Oh, no. English? Well, no. You know, what kind of food are you going to eat? What kind of clothes are you going to wear? It's determined by where you live. And what that goes back to the Lost Teachings book, when I have you stand in the middle and ask those questions. Where am I? What time is it? Which way is the wind blowing? Because that's going to determine what kind of knowledge you need to have. And that's not sitting in the, at somebody's sacred fire and taking their spiritual teachings and then trying to make it fit one size fits all, because it doesn't work. Anyway. I'm going to do a plug right now.
Okay, do it.
If who's listening and that's interested, I teach a 5-week course using this book as a textbook, The Lost Teachings of the Runes and the Wheel of Life. I will be starting that class in October, and I will be teaching another class, which is a 3-week class, which is it's more geared toward women of the North. It's witches, runes, and the Nornir, and that's a 3-week course. And if anyone is interested, send me an email, because I don't have this up on my website yet, but send me an email. I will put you on the notice list and give you the information, because I do online teaching all the time, and as well as doing one-on-one mentoring with people that really want to come to relationship with the runes in a deeper, different way. And this is my life. I mean, this is not my weekend Renaissance fair. They took over my life. The ancestors, the runes, whatever you want to call it. I don't have a choice or an option anymore. That's all that I do. You and Mario know that, right?
Oh yes,
Oh,
we know
yes,
it.
we know.
And that's what we love about you. And I will say, the Lost Teachings of the Runes, great book. And I did take that course with Ingrid. I think it was 2 years ago now at Invoke. And I highly recommend that if anybody is interested in learning more and learning with Ingrid, because that class really opened up my relationship with the runes in a brand new way. Because going home and having the homework assignment and the assignments really allowed me to dive into the runes deeper than I ever had before. And I had some really profound experiences while doing that. And then coming back to the class and being able to talk it out with everybody and you having your insights was really valuable. And it helped me a lot. I mean, I learned a ton about myself, about the runes, and also about you and everything else. So I recommend that for sure for people, definitely. And if you're still down to talk a little bit, I kind of want to get into the suppression of the Northern mysteries and all of this information. I know Mario has things to say about that because I think that there's so many secrets to life within these philosophies, within the runes, within the things that are frozen in the ice, is one of the main reasons why we've been it's been pushed onto the back burner for society. And now it is starting to come out, just like a lot of things are starting to come out of the woodwork that people probably had no idea would ever come to the surface. The same thing is happening with these Northern traditions. And so I kind of wanted to allow Mario to speak on that as well as you and talk a little bit about these secrets that are hidden there, these secrets to life, to death, to rebirth, the universe, and all of these things that could be tied up in this symbolism and why it's been hidden and kept from us a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's something I wanted to talk about as well, because really, to me, it seems like polar wisdom or the polar tradition, the Northern Mysteries, it's really, really holistic. And so my symbolic journey started with a lot of different things, but I would say that astrology, the tarot, things of that sort. But the more I dug, the more research I did, it really took me to the north. And there's something to be said about the Arctic origins of things. And I actually think that a lot of our symbolic language comes from the north as well. And so that's one of my sort of bigger conclusions over the years. And I think that what's kind of happened too is a lot of people who were following a more of a polar tradition, they were focusing on the northern sky more so. So Ursa Major and Minor, the Great Bear, Little Bear, which are the dippers, right? Draco's up there as well. And then you've got that pole star, which is the hub of the wheel of heaven, right? And there's so much significance there that my understanding is this was actually a early sky clock. People looked at that as being the preeminent sky clock in the heavens, the rotation of Ursa Major around the pole star. It's a circumpolar constellation, right? And I think that polar wisdom connection with the pole star. And to me, as well, one thing that comes along with all of this, with this philosophy or spiritual outlook, the earth plays a much, much greater role. Its significance is preeminent. And so to me, I see the polar tradition as being very much an earth-based tradition as well. Interesting that with astrology, you're following the path of the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun, right? The 12 signs of the zodiac. And so to me, it seems like there was a great shift in humanity from a polar understanding of things to a solar understanding of things. And with that comes a unique perspective and outlook and everything else. But to me, things seem to be under the polar tradition way more internal, right? This self-sufficiency, this autonomy, this sort of independence and sovereignty and everything else. Versus the solar tradition, it seems like everything is kind of outside of self. External validation, external, seemingly kind of everything, right? External solutions, and a lot of your problems are externalized as well. So that's why I think that the polar tradition, it's way more holistic. It has a lot more to do with self and your sacred center and your true authenticity. And that, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why it's kind of been suppressed and swept to the side. The other thing I'll say real quick is that, before I let Ingrid talk here, is that the more I look into polar wisdom and the northern mysteries and everything, I see a lot of goddess symbolism that I think is very, very interesting. So, as an example, Ursa Major isn't just a great bear, it's a great mother bear who's fierce and can defend her young, right? She's a warrior, unto herself. And so, to me, I kind of see the suppression of the divine feminine being suppressed alongside the polar tradition in favor of a more masculine, patriarchal sort of energy with the solar tradition, the solar order, if you want to call it that. But those are just kind of my 2 cents real quick. I'd love to hear what Ingrid has to say about any of that.
All right. I don't know if we lost her. If she's still here. I hope so. Trying to unmute and it's not allowing me to unmute. She's gone. Oh no. Huh. That sucks. That was a great weave right there, babe. I hope she heard it.
Yeah, same here. I'm sure she'll be back.
Oh, here she is.
Both of you and Mario. So I'm back.
Did you hear what he was saying?
Yes, I did. Up to talking about the polar traditions and the polar wisdom being much more holistic is kind of where everything cut off.
I think the interesting point too that he brought up that you may have missed, babe, if you want to reiterate the suppression of the sacred feminine along with this information and how that kind of correlates and what your thought on that. I thought that was a good tie-in there.
Yeah, sure. So Ingrid, I was just saying that the more I research the polar tradition, the stars of the northern sky, Ursa Major and Minor, I mentioned the fact that Ursa Major isn't just a great bear, it's a great mother bear, right? Who can protect her young and who is fierce and not to be messed with and everything else. I've also come across a lot of myths, older myths, that link the northern sky with a divine feminine presence. And so what I kind of see, and I would love to know if you agree or not, or you see something else, but it seems to me like the divine feminine, which is closely related to the mysteries, was kind of suppressed or solar-centric sort of energy, which is more masculine and patriarchal in nature. So do you see a relationship with the northern mysteries and maybe perhaps this great primordial goddess of the north, and was that suppressed alongside some of this northern symbolism?
Okay, I'm unmuted. That's another big question, right? Just flat answer, I would say yes. We're pulling at threads that will unravel some very ancient beliefs that have been laid on top of us rather than in harmony with the actuality of the experience. So I would say, there's a lot I would have to say. As you go north and we have the pole star and we have the heavens turning around above us in a very different way. We also have a different kind of experience with the sun, particularly when you're up by the Arctic Circle. The sun only rises once a year and it sets once a year. It's a very different way to count time. You're not going to be like where we are in the Pacific Northwest, the sun comes up every morning, the sun goes down every evening in longer or shorter periods of time, but it's rising and setting. When you're really circumpolar, above the North Pole, up by the North Pole, the sun comes up once a year and then it sets, and it's in the sky for half the year and it's out of the sky for half the year. So you would make sense that people would measure time differently, speak of time differently, and have a different relationship with the moon, possibly, and how she interacted with the sun, but also with darkness and understanding the sky. Because if you have longer periods of dark, you would have longer periods of extended periods of time to be looking at the stars. I think that we get kind of off track when we continue to look at astrology through the lens of the desert people. We had our own astrology. We had our own way of what we saw in the night sky were same stars, different configuration possibly, but we saw patterns different than those who are looking at the sky. I mean, we know that about south of the equator, north of the equator even, but let's just go even further and say, what if we set aside all of this astrological symbols that come to us, again, from the people of the South, and we start exploring these hidden references to astrological symbols and beings, creatures and stories from the perspective of the Northern traditions. And there is more and more of that coming out. And you have to kind of like looking for the needle in the haystack, but it's there. And I also propose that I think that if we set aside that astrology and we start looking just with our own fresh eyes, and we start thinking in terms of what the northern ancestors saw and how maybe they related to it or spoke about it. And then I have to have a drink of water. Hang on. Then going back to the grid or the matrix or what I saw with the lines connecting and the runes on them, I suspect that when we looked at the heavens and we saw the connections between the stars that made certain shapes, and we called that a particular sign, a star sign, that they related to runes and that they related to power points and power lines, let's call them ley lines or dragon lines or whatever, on the earth. And that our ancestors understood a relationship between these star patterns, the runic patterns, and the energy patterns on the earth that we call ley lines. And that if we set aside the old way of measuring and speaking about it and start looking instead for what has been lost, we will find our way back to some of these connections with the dark. And when we got rid of when we dismissed or discounted or dissipated that female kind of energy, a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's connected to darkness, and we're saturated with, it's not okay. Dark is bad, down is bad, hidden is bad. There's evil in that, and then that's projected onto night. It's projected onto anything that has to do with death, and then we're pushing away all of those things that seem to all be embodied in the female part of the human experience. We grow babies in the dark. We deal with burial. We're not, we're so bad that we don't even say dark moon anymore. I bring that up in the classes. It's like, it's okay, say the word dark. No, do you mean the new moon? No, I don't mean the new moon. I mean the night when the moon in the sky is not reflecting any light. That's the night of the dark moon. But we can't even put that on the calendar. You don't even ever, there are some calendars, but it's like you have the full moon and you have a new moon, and that's not the opposite. because we can't say the word dark. It's like, oh, that's bad. I'm looking for the light. And when we're always looking for that, then we've discounted this wisdom from the stars. We've also, because you can't see the stars when it's light. Can you? Only thing you see is the sun. So I think that this is, this is very simplistic, and I'm being a little cheeky about it, but I think that what you're talking about, Mario, is really very true, that when we lose connection with the dark, and we lose connection with the north and the northern teachings, we have also lost a lot of our connectedness with the feminine. And I don't even know if we should say sacred feminine and sacred masculine. Do we need to differentiate? Is there an unsacred feminine? Is there an unsacred masculine? No. Is there a corrupt and an incorrupt? So I think let's start putting aside all of the language that comes to us from all these other cultures, and begin to look for ways to find the bits and pieces that are missing. That's part of these lost teachings, and to start naming them, or listening for the names that and stop the comparison, because we're always trying to compare rather than recreating that which has been lost. And if I talked about, let's go back to the world tree. In the Norse tradition, there are the evident main 9 worlds, but then it speaks of there being 9 realms of Helheim, for instance. So each of the realms has levels within themselves. But if we just took the basic 9 realms in Norse myth or Norse sagas, and take them from the world tree, and start thinking in terms not of the 12 signs of the zodiac, but of, let's say we spoke about the 9 realms of the northern heavens, and we divided the year into 9, and we said, then I'm born in this realm. I'm born when this realm is evident in the night sky, when there's the constellations that line up to make this rune and to make the name of this particular realm of Niflheim or Helheim or Svartalfheim or Midgard. And instead of saying I'm a Pisces or I'm a Capricorn, to start looking for ways to speak of ourselves using the language from the north. And it's not easy to find it, but we have to be more diligent. And that's the same thing when we're always comparing the gods of the north to the Greek and Roman gods. It's beautiful mythology and great rich wisdom that's held in Greek mythology, for instance, or Roman mythology. We have our own mythologies, and we don't teach it, because we're being taught the classics, and the classics are not coming out of the north. They're coming out of that Greek and Roman civilization. Everything is measured by that. And great example, my little grandson came home from school several years ago, and they were studying Greek mythology in like 3rd grade or something, and he was so excited. It's like, Grandma, did you know that there's a god of the volcano, and there's a god of the ocean? And he's giving the names from the Greek gods, which is beautiful, fine. But then I said to him, I said, Archer, do you know we have our own gods? Do you know we have our own god of a volcano, and our own god of an ocean, and our own, we have a god of skiing, and but this is the piece that's missed. And it's so troubling now, because it's wrapped up with, white supremacy and neo-Nazi ideology. And then you throw in Hollywood and cartoons and video games and the Vikings. And it's no wonder that people are turned off by it. And that's, to me, it's like, well, you're wearing Thor's hammer, usually some macho, da-da-da-da. Just ask the kid, it's like, you're son of Thor. Do you know who your grandmother is? Do you know that Thor's mother was the earth? I just start intruding into this and getting out of the stereotype into something that's really rich and missing. It's so dynamic, it's so meaningful, and it speaks to another piece that's, been pushed away or hidden or maligned, and then it's a cartoon. I one of the classes that I taught over the years is called Take the Runes Back from Odin. They don't belong to him. They really don't. He grabbed them out of the well, and the well guarded by the Nornir, and that means the runes were there before Odin. They don't belong to him. He didn't invent them. And maybe he sacrificed himself and hung on a tree and got stabbed. But that sounds like a story. That sounds like a Jesus Christ kind of story, hanging on a tree and being stabbed. And did that Christianized thing come into a story that it doesn't belong there? And do you have to sacrifice? Do you have a right to grab the runes out of the well? That's another question. What is that? Is that an entitlement thing? And now we can only have them because of him? Because that's how it gets all twisted around and perverted, I think. So that's also what you're talking about, Mario, when you say there's this dismissal of the feminine or the female, because if you're fixated on Odin, and then you dare to actually call him All Father, which goes right back to the same kind of story, that there's a father, that life came from the male, rather than looking at the story of the wells and the Nornir, who are presented as female, as the earth as being female, as night is called Not, and earth is the daughter of night and water. There's when we put Odin into the picture and fixate on him, that is an opening to remove the stories of the female. Because again, we've got another thing, the same thing in the Bible. It's like all the women, they have no names. They don't even exist, most of them, other than just, somebody's wife. And that's what happens in so much of the sagas from, the Northern Mysteries, is that we know more about these couple of macho males. How dare we call Odin All Father? I just would say that. It's like, how dare you do that? Father of what? Okay. So
and Ingrid, this is
I'm gonna
just 1 second.
This is one of the things that I really appreciate about you, is because you're asking these questions, and you're okay asking them, because a lot of times, even hearing it, sometimes you like somebody might get, it's like a trigger, it's going to trigger somebody, and that's the reason why so many things aren't mentioned and what have you. But I just think that with all the things in my life that I question, why is it that you can't question certain things, but you can question, who invents the weather or whatever? And then there's these little things that you can't. And if you do, you're damned and you are not credible or what have you. So I'm really glad that it went here, because I know that it's a main thread of your work, and I appreciate it because you bring something new to the table. It's refreshing in so many ways that a lot of people aren't talking about in these realms.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes, because it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I just think we don't ask questions, and we need, if your button's pushed or you're triggered by something, good. And I'll share something. When my second book came out, The Lost Teachings, and there was, as is the case with all books, there was this horror. It's probably still on the internet. Some horrible review. Like you just stabbed in the heart. It's like, how dare somebody write that about my lifeblood? We know that happens. And one of my sons said to me, and I just love this question. He said, "Mom, why would you want to write a book that everybody liked?" And then I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Because that to me, that's meant I didn't say anything.
Great point.
Why would you put the energy of writing something if it's the same old, you've reground the hamburger or chewed the baby's food and spit it out? Of course it's going to be controversial because we're shaking things up, and I think it's the time for this. And that, we are so well, everybody's so afraid to say anything anymore today. I mean, and this is frightening. This is frightening. And you should question. And if it troubles somebody, then bless that, because in the troubling, they get to ask a question. Then we come back around. Maybe you come back to the same place that you were in, but you're richer for it. But if we're all just like tiptoeing around and worrying about that offense, we don't have any teeth. There has to be something that we're chewing on, because the question, we're not really looking for the answer. We're looking for something more that's not the same old. And that's, I think, what, for me right now, we not only question how we're being censored and silenced in the system, but I think even in the realm of the runes and the northern traditions, we're doing it to ourselves. When we come and say, "Oh, how dare you have more runes than the runes of the 24 runes of the All Father?" It's like, okay, what happened to the mother? And read these stories. Think about what we have in the sagas. They were collected and translated under the, eyes of a Catholic monk, scholar, whatever you want to call it. There has to be some flavor in there. And you start reading them and you think, whoa, that doesn't sound like the northern tradition. That smells like Christianity to me. And it's like, question it. Don't take that as don't make a Bible, another Bible out of the Eddas. Bless them. They have beautiful information, but just like there is in the Bible, but don't make it the word of, I only follow the Eddas. I only follow the All Father. And he had to sacrifice himself in order to get the runes so that I could be saved. That's the same story, isn't it?
Very similar.
You think? So,
oh man. Well, this has been wonderful, and I want to check in and see if Mario has anything else that he wanted to contribute before we let you go on with the rest of your evening, because we're heading into the hour and a half mark. So let's check in with Mr. Mario. It's a shame we had so many technical things, because it felt like it wasn't able to flow, but it flowed anyway. So here we are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everything you bring to the table, Ingrid. So thank you once again for being here. I like your perspective quite a bit. And there's a lot that I basically am just kind of co-signing. I understand where you're coming from, especially with just the feminine. One of the things that I really like about your book, which I started reading in preparation for this, is your the emphasis on asking questions, right? Which is more feminine in nature. It relates more to the mysteries versus having answers, right, for everything. So I think that's deeply important, and I think that is part of what I kind of get out of polar wisdom as well, and especially kind of questioning yourself and your motives, and even just kind of like your authenticity. And then you start wondering about things like, where's my line at? Where's my line in the sand? morally, ethically, spiritually, things like that. And I can tell that you've thought quite a bit about these different sort of things. And so that's why I'm such a huge proponent. I mean, people who follow my work know that I can't go on a stream and not talk about something related to the North or something related to the polar constellations or whatever. It is so my thing, because I just feel like this is where a lot of things came out of. There's a genesis or an origin story here, right? And there are people who are starting to really understand that and kind of integrate things that kind of way. So I was really excited just to have you on and, riff on some of these ideas and everything else. But as far as final questions or anything, I don't really have anything. I just wanted to let you know I appreciate you, and maybe we can have you back on at some point with less technical issues so we can get this flow going maybe a little more clearly. And I feel like this is kind of scratching the surface too. I think there's a lot of other things that we can kind of discuss and talk about. And I like your no nonsense sort of approach as well. And whenever I've really tapped in and spent time with the runes, and as Michelle and I have done readings together and things like that, I like how straightforward things are. And I like how it seems like a lot of the fat has been trimmed as far as like obviously it's not just a divination system, but when you're using it for divination purposes, it seems like it just cuts through a lot of nonsense. And I feel like I don't feel that way with the tarot. I don't feel that way with some other systems. So to me, it's just kind of like you embody sort of that persona, I guess, or you embody kind of that same sort of idea. And in a lot of ways too, the polar wisdom and the northern mystery stuff that I'm interested in, it kind of operates the same way, where it's just kind of like there's less sort of fluff there. It's a little bit more direct. So I think that's definitely needed. It's direct, yet there's still a lot of mysterious things going on. There's still lots of things to kind of pull out. It's a deep, deep well of information. So anyways, with that, thank you so much. I'm going to mute myself. And you're awesome. So it was great having you.
I'm glad to be here. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I love that you trim the fat away and there's not the fluff. And I really think that that's one of the beautiful aspects of rune wisdom, is that it's clean and it isn't pretty. And like just the example of, oh, this is the Berkana rune and it's about the birthing mother, to which I say yes, and the mother will eat her young if she needs to. And we must always remember that every rune holds that wisdom, that she who gives birth will also kill.
That's a great message to end on too, because it's how it is. There's no light without the dark, as we all here know. So that's wonderful. And I want to give you an opportunity before you go to let people know where they can find you, if there's anything you're excited about. I know that you're working on a book right now. I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but if you wanted to just encourage people to reach out to you, the floor is yours for this. And all your links are also going to be down below in the description for people who check this out afterwards.
Okay. The easiest way to find me on the internet is with my name. My website is ingridkincaid.com. So that's easy. And then that takes you in lots of different directions. You can communicate with me directly. I will be teaching, like I said, starting in October, 2 more classes. I do love working, providing rune mentoring, and I offer year-long programs where you make a commitment to do that. So I have 2 openings coming up. One of them will be in September and one of them in the beginning of October, because I can only take so many people through the year. And yes, I am working on a 3rd book. Its focus is much more toward she who gives birth, the birthers, I mean, that's also, so you're going to step on somebody's toes, but I go from that place of like I'm writing about the body that has the ability to carry life inside of itself and to give birth to it. And that this sacred, hidden and forbidden dark wisdom that's held in the body of she who has the ability to give birth, whether you gave birth or not, but the body of a human that has the ability to birth, and it is connected to rune wisdom. However, the direction in will be, working title right now is Women of the Always. And then one section will be Dark Moon Women and Women as Birthers. And so I'm excited. Books have their own gestation period. So I'm hoping to have it done by next year, beginning of next year.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is your process of writing. But, I have a feeling that we'll be able to talk about that at some other point, because it's different for everybody. And it's always inspiring to hear when somebody's working on a book or they're working on their third or fourth book, because it's a process. And it's always one of those things. There's like new challenges that come up with every single book, and every single book is different. So, yeah. That's interesting, and I look forward to it.
Happy to do some episode on the writing process, and and as an encouragement too, and also because one book I self-published, one book is published through a major publishing house, and I'm happy we could just spend time talking about that as an experience. Because a lot of the work I do around creativity is tapping into that creative place in yourselves where we all give birth when we create. And I believe that that's also what the runes inspire, is a connection to that process, that life process. And something has to die in order for something to be born.
Oh yeah.
And
that's the fun part too.
It is.
As weird as that sounds.
Yeah.
So I love it. Look forward to the next time we get to chat. Enjoy the rest of your time with your daughter. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Yes, very welcome. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for sticking in there through the technical difficulties. That sound stuff was a little bit grinding on the gears, if you know what I mean, because you were hearing me and or Mario speak through her speakers. So there was really nothing we could do about that one. It was unfortunate, but that's just how it goes. So hopefully it wasn't too bad on the other end while listening. But as always, I want to thank all the patrons. And there's one other thing I want to talk to everybody about too, that we didn't get a chance to talk. We touched on the subject, but I wanted to bring this book up to Ingrid, but didn't get a chance. She is full of information. So once you get her going, she can go. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have her on too, because, she has so much to share that you ask her one thing and then all these things open up. So it's really cool. But before we talk about the other book, thank you to the patrons. Oh, thank you. Chance, Binna, Sarah, Liam, Amy, Miriam Hank, Jenny G, Erica, Moonlander, Spoons, Mary, Catherine, Logan, Lily, Debbie, Natasha, Mary Beth, Nausicaa, Stephanie, and Jennifer. Thank you so much, everybody. Your support means a lot, and it's really helping us in a big way. So thank you so much, and we really, really appreciate it. As always, you can go to patreon.com/thehealinghome if you'd like to become a patron, and you can sign up. I've got 3 tiers, 3, 6, and 9, whatever one fits your fancy. And all patrons get the full moon offering 1 day ahead of time before everybody else. So you can make sure that you can get your hands on something if you're looking for it, and more exclusive content coming down the pipeline there. Next week, I'm going to do a solo show. I've got some stuff to talk about, so I'm going to talk about it. So next week, which is August 15th already. Whoa. Boy, is it flying. August 15th at 4 p.m. here on the Healing Home. I'm going to do a solo show. I've got a few things in mind that I already know I want to talk about. So if you want to find out what I'm going to be talking about, come on and hang out for a while. We'll be here doing that. So next full moon offering newsletter comes out on the 30th of this month. We have 2 super moons this month. Sure feels like that. Sure feels like that type of month to me. So lots of potent energy going on. So that'll be coming out on the 30th of August. I still have 2 tinctures left of my mugwort offering. So only 2 left. And I also have 2 left of my mugwort dream team set. If you're looking for the set, that comes with a tincture and an anointing oil. Otherwise, the offering for the month is just a 1 ounce fresh garden mugwort tincture. So hit me up if you're interested in that. Up on here on the screen, you can see my offering menu with all the prices. The 1 ounce tincture is 18, and the set itself is 33. So just a little heads up on that. Also, bulk orders. I got a bulk order for soap. I'm super excited about that. So just letting people know that if you're wanting like a full batch of soap, or you're wanting more than like say 10 bars of soap or something, or even if you want 10 bars, that would be considered a bulk order to me. So you can let me know if you wanted to do something like that, and you can contact me as usual, michelleshealinghome@gmail.com for the orders for sure. You can also contact me through my website, michelleshealinghome.com. There are, signups for my newsletter there. You can send me a question or what have you through the website as well if you don't feel like emailing me. But emailing is the most direct. You can call or text me 503-568-1569 as well. That goes to my Google Voice number, which goes through my email. So I always usually get them, but sometimes there's like technical difficulties on that end. Just a heads up. Last Thursday, every Thursday, another episode. This Thursday coming up, we are in between 2 topics. We're leaning towards the Beatles, it seems like. So, and Mario's been revisiting his Beatles information that he's learned over the years about just how sketchy all of that is. How many questions, speaking of questions, how many questions we both have about the Beatles and what the hell's going on there. So that's probably what we're going to be diving into on Thursday. So come join us for that. As always, symbolicstudies.com if you wanted to get in touch with Mario. He definitely has his website going, and you can contact him through that. You can book a reading through there, schedule a study session, prints, all of those things. Want to reach out to him for design work, you can do that all through the website. And yeah, his YouTube as well. And he is going to actually be having a live stream this Friday with Mr. Ben Balderson. They're going to be talking about the periodic table. So I'm not sure what time they're going live on Friday, but knowing Mario, it'll probably be somewhere in the range between like 4 and 6 p.m. Pacific Standard. So check out that if you're interested in hearing him and Ben go at it, which I think will be a really good conversation. So before I sign off here, this is a book that, I don't know, he was in the chat earlier. He's probably took off, but Zarelith actually recommended this book to Mario. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was even a year ago or so, maybe 6 months. And so it's called Northern Paganism, the Runes. This book is all about the runes being found in the stars and within constellations. So it goes along with kind of what Ingrid was talking about. And I was going to try and find an in with this idea, but it just didn't work out tonight. But I wanted to bring this book to an attention. And if Zarelith is still around, shout out to Zarelith for bringing this onto our radar, because as I've read through this, it's a very small book. It's very easy to read. It's also written for somebody who is new to the runes and might want to learn about the runes while they're learning about what constellations the runes could be found in. It's interesting because majority of the runes, in their opinion, are found in the constellation Ursa Major, which is really interesting. So I did write a list down, and I don't have it on me right now, of the runes that are found in Ursa Major. But for example, Laguz, which we brought up today. Ingrid brought up Laguz. Laguz is found in Ursa Major when you're looking at it from their diagram. So you see how Laguz there is inside the bear. And the cool thing about this is that there's the upright, version of the rune in the constellation, and then the Merksave, is that how you say it? Merkstav, which was the reverse of the rune. And so this changes throughout the seasons. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was how Fehu, okay, when Fehu, for people who know what the runes, it usually typically represents wealth and cattle and abundance. And there's a just like this, it's a very abundant rune, okay? But usually it is correlated with cattle because back in the day, you know, cattle, lots of people know, was actually a means of income. That was a way to measure someone's wealth, was how many cows they had. So in here, when they depict Fehu, if you can see this here, okay, gotta go look at that. So then I'm going to read for you what they have to say. Fehu represents cattle, wealth, and increase. During the late spring to early summer months of the north, the Great Bear constellation is facing north. When things on Earth are increasing, birth and rebirth are taking place. Positivity and growth are seen by our northern pagan ancestors. This is the beginning of the northern pagan year. Now, when we are moving out of spring, the bear is not facing north anymore, okay? It faces south. So this, to me, makes so much sense with what they have to say when this season changes. It represents a decrease in cattle, a decrease in wealth. During late autumn through winter months, the Great Bear faces away from the north, and this matches the time of the year when herds are thinned and the hunts are taking place during Odin's time. Negativity, loss, struggle, and decrease are seen by our northern pagan ancestors. When the tail of the Great Bear points north, the fires of the hearth are lit. So that's just one little taste of this. I get the feeling that Zarelith and I will at some point get down on the runes because I know he wants to talk about them as well, and I would like to talk to him about it. So I see you there, yo. Yeah, this book is great. I really think that there is some. Speaking of questions again, brings up great questions. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. And kind of like what Ingrid was saying, you know, our northern ancestors saw things differently. It's different. They saw different things than they did in the South. So how couldn't the northern peoples have seen the runes and the stars if they were such a large part of their life? To me, it seems as though they would definitely be seeing them in the stars, and they would definitely be a part of these major constellations. Okay. And so anyway, I just wanted to shout that out. I also wanted to bring it up because I didn't get a chance to with Ingrid, but I still have some of you guys here around. So anyway, Northern Paganism and the Runes by Scott and Billy Joel Carlson. Not sure where Mario ended up buying it from, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's on Amazon or something. So anyway, if you're interested in that sort of thing and thinking about the runes in a different way, I also recommend both of Ingrid's books, The Runes Revealed, An Unfamiliar Journey, and the Lost Teachings of the Runes, Northern Mysteries, and the Wheel of Life. And this is the class. This book is based. The class that I took with her is based on this book. So this book is actually basically the textbook for that class. And yeah, I think it is 6 weeks or something. And we met once a week for 6 weeks. And it was a really, really nice time. And I learned a lot, as I said, during our stream. So with all that said, I will bid you guys adieu and say goodnight. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks for hanging in there with the technical difficulties and the echoes and the mutes and non-mutes and all that stuff. And yeah, until next time, I will see you guys then. Come hang out on Thursday if you want to jump into the Summer of Love with us. And until then, until the next time, next week's solo show, come hang out, see what I've got brewing. Because boy, has there been a lot. It's been an interesting few weeks, I'll say, for myself. So I'm going to talk about it. Anyway, hope you guys have a lovely evening. I'll talk to y'all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.